that, I'd like to begin and welcome those who came. I'd like to welcome all of the regulars. I'd like to welcome my chavrusa from the Yeshiva Gedol of the Five Towns, from Rabbi Aryeh's Chabura, Rabbi David Kaziv. Thank you for joining for the first time. It's a pleasure to have you. Okay, thank you for calling Mayor. We're glad to have you from the Yeshiva Gedola. Eli Melech, my chavrusa. Eli Melech Weizman is also joining. And who's in for the last three digits 032 from 347? Is that Rabbi Yeshua? Oh, it's Rabbi Mechel. Shkaycha Mechel, my chashav achaver, Mechel Jakubowitz from the Five Towns. Thank you for joining, and thank you all for coming. Be'ez Hashem, today we're going to be discussing the Ramban and Parshas Bo, which is well referred to as the famous Ramban. Rabbi Katzstein, the Yeshiva Gedol of the Five Towns, he says it's a very important Ramban. He says all of the chalakim, all of the aspects of this Ramban, not just the very ending part, but also the steps building up. So Be'ez Hashem, we're going to cover all of the steps leading up to the final climax of the Ramban. So if you're following along, we'll see some inside, some outside. We're going to start from the Ramban at the end of Parshas Bo. We're going to start from the paragraph that starts Ve'atza Omer Lecha Klal B'tam Mitzvos Rabos. The Ramban is coming at the end of the Parsha. In the Parsha, we've concluded the one we just laid on Shabbos. We had the last three makos, the last three plagues. So the Ramban starts off by taking a very broad approach at world history. The Ramban says as follows, that from times previous, there were three mistakes that people generally made when they were thinking about their approach to Hashem and Hashem's involvement in the world. One mistake was some people thought that simply Hashem didn't exist. They thought that the world just came to be through some happening, but independent of any God, and that Hashem simply doesn't exist. Second approach is that Hashem exists, but he doesn't really know what's going on in the world. There is a Hashem, but he doesn't know what's going on in the world. Then the third approach is that Hashem Hashem exists, and Hashem knows about what's involved in the world, but Hashem doesn't really care to involve himself in the world and to take schar v'onesh, schar, reward for people who do the right thing, and onesh, punishment for those who don't. So these were the three mistakes that people used to make. So Hashem decided at the time of Yetzias Mitzrayim that he would make clear to everyone that all three of these hanachos, these three conceptions, were all false. The Ramban, in the next paragraph, V'lachein Yomer HaKasav, the Ramban quotes a few psukim in which the Torah gives a little appellation, a little comment about what the Makkah is about. First, the Ramban quotes from Paraches Pasuk Yud Ches by Makas Dever. I'd like to welcome my grandma, Mrs. Ruth Brain, a regular from Sefer Torah. Thank you for joining from Weathersfield, Connecticut.
Hi, Yoni.
Hi, and hi, Grandma. I'd like to also welcome that my dad is here in person. So I'd like to welcome my dad as well. Yes, thank you to our friends from Sharon as well. So by Makas Dever, the pasuk says, "Ki ani Hashem b'kerev haaretz," that I am Hashem in the midst of the earth. And this teaches about hashgacha, that Hashem has oversight, because in Makas Dever, Hashem distinguished between the Jewish animals which were saved and the Egyptian animals which were put to death, the ones that were left outside. So this shows that Hashem is in charge of the hashgacha. Hashem is in charge of the oversight. Then another pasuk tes, parak tes pasuk chav tes says, "Leman teza ki la Hashem haaretz," in order that you should know that Hashem belongs the world, that the world belongs to Hashem. L'horetz al hachidish. This teaches about the chiddush, about the concept of yesh me'ayin, that originally there was nothing and then Hashem created something. So that teaches that Hashem exists in the world. And then the last pasuk is that our man quotes is parak tes pasuk dalid, ba'avor teta ki'in kamoni b'chol haaretz, to teach me that there's none like me, none that have the power like me, like all the land. And here the man introduces a new point, l'horetz al hayacholos. This teaches that Hashem is the kol yachol, that Hashem is fully capable of doing what He wants. Shu shalit bakol, that he rules over everything. In ma'akiv biyado, and nothing holds back Hashem. Like Rabbi Kastin said in the Shmuz a few weeks ago about Yaakov Avinu and Levado, Hashem has this bechina of Levado, that Hashem Himself acts and nothing gets in His way. Hashem decides exactly how He wants to act based on His own decisions. So all of these aspects, the Mitzrayim, the Egyptians, were either in doubt about or they totally refuted. And with the Makos, Hashem proved that He exists, that He knows what's going on in the world, and He's fully capable of carrying it out. Now, before we go on, I'll ask if we have any questions so far about the Ramban's starting point of the three issues with the position of the nations of the world and how Hashem disproved. Thank you, Mrs. Rudenstein. Mrs. Rudenstein is saying that we see these three ways that Hashem is involved in the world encapsulated with the statement of the first commandment, which will receive Parshas Yisro in a couple of weeks. B'ez Hashem, Anochi Hashem Elokecha Asher Hotzitzicha Me'eretz Mitzrayim B'beis Avadim. I am Hashem, Lord your God, who took you out of Mitzrayim from the house of bondage. So Hashem took us out using the Makos, using the Zroa Netuya, the outstretched arm, and Hashem proved that He was fully capable. And perhaps this is why it is the first commandment, because Hashem showed during the Yetzias Mitzrayim all these important things, how Hashem exists, is involved in the world, and nothing can hold Him back. He rewards the righteous and punishes the wicked. And then the fourth thing, which you kind of slipped in at the end, is that Hashem is fully capable, that nothing can stop Him, that Hashem does what He wants. In the next paragraph, Uvavur, the Ramban speaks out that Hashem does not make these Nisim Gluyim at all times. It's specifically at the times of Yetzias Mitzrayim, and maybe very occasionally throughout history. Maybe another example is like Eliyahu Navi Bahar Carmel, when the fire flew up to Shemayim, even though water was doused on the Mizbeach to disprove the doubters. But wonders only happen occasionally, and it's a chashuv nekuda. It's very worthwhile noting that to chap on to a nes galui is not a davar pashut. It's not such a simple matter to realize that what's so-called an open miracle is really from Hashem. I was speaking to Shabbos with my neighbor, Mr. Richard Waldman from Sharon, and he mentioned to me about the Rashi in the beginning of Parshas B'Shalach on Chamushim. Many of us are familiar with this Rashi. Rashi says that one pshat in Chamushim is that only 1 out of 5 members of Klal Yisrael left Mitzrayim. The rest of them died in the Shlosh Tzmei HaFela, in the days of darkness. And the Bitachon Hotline explains the rush on this Rashi, or on this Nikuda, and says that the reason why 4/5 of Klal Yisrael did not leave Mitzrayim is because they didn't believe that the Makos were from Hashem. Now someone could ask, how is it possible that they could think the Makos were not from Hashem? So the Bitachon Hotline explains. The first Makas Dam, they said, there was something in the atmosphere that created the water to become reddish. Then Makas Svardeya, Once this reddish hue comes in the water, the next natural outcome is that frogs jump out of the water. Makas kinim. Then when frogs are jumping around the land, the natural thing is that lice develops, and so on and so forth. And the B'tach Naline says this is how the 4/5 of Klal Yisrael explained all the Makos. So we read the Makos, we read the Parsha, we hear Lein and Shul, and we think it's so obvious to see the Yad Hashem, but 4/5 of Klal Yisrael did not see the Yad Hashem. In 4/5 of Klal Yisrael did not see the Yad Hashem in the Makos. So for us to understand, when we see a Nes Goloi, a revealed miracle, to see that it's from Hashem, this is a very noble thing, and it's really worth a lot, and it's not something to be taken for granted.
Cousin Andy just came on.
Okay, I'd like to welcome my first cousin, Mr. Yoni Monat, joining from Melrose, who's joined us before. Andy slipped us in between putting his kids to bed, so we'd like to thank Andy for coming on.
Nice to see you.
And we may remember Andy gave us the rendition of Oy Hanukkah by the last shir on Hanukkah. So the Ramban says that Lemaisa. So we, assuming we're holding by hopping on to and realizing that the Nisim are from Hashem, that the revealed miracles from Hashem. Now the Ramban deals with a big question. Very nice, this may have happened 2,000-3,000 years ago in Mitzrayim, but how could we keep fresh this feeling that Hashem exists, Hashem is involved, and Hashem is fully capable? How do we keep this feeling alive? So Ramban says that the Torah already addressed this, and the Torah was mitzvah, commanded many mitzvahs, zecher litzias Mitzrayim, which means to remember the exodus from Egypt. We have many mitzvahs we do throughout the day. Tzitzis, tefillin, on Shabbos we make kiddush, but every day we say Kriyat Shema. On an annual basis when we put up a sukkah. All of these mitzvahs are designed to help us remember Yetzias Mitzrayim. The Mefarshim try to give a number of mashalim to explain what this is like. I'll quote first from Rabbi Katzstein, quoting from the Mashgiach, his Rebbe, of Shlomo Volbe from Eretz Yisrael, and the Mashgiach says that mitzvahs zecher l'tzias Mitzrayim is like a thermos for Yetzias Mitzrayim. Just like a thermos keeps a hot drink warm, so too the mitzvahs that we do to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim help keep the memory of Yetzias Mitzrayim warm and fresh in our mind. Rabbi Laff, the Rosh Kol in Boston, told me from Rav Dessler that Rav Dessler says that mitzvahs zecher l'tzias Mitzrayim is like a stick that is something visual, tangible that we're able to see to remind us of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Another mashal I thought of is like a picture, like a person has a picture with his family or his friends or his rebbeim. This reminds him of the relationship that he has with these people. When he sees a picture, that gives him a reminder. Lastly, Rabbi Gams, the posek of Yeshiva Gedolah, who actually Baruch Hashem just had a mazel, he just had a baby boy recently. This is on Tuesday, Be'ez Hashem. Rabbi Gams, he said that it's like tea essence. That tea essence is like a very strong drink of concentration. I'm quoting Rabbi Gams from a different context and applying it here. That this Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim is like tea essence. That's like a very strong concentration of a substance that we can use to give out drops later on. So Yetzias Mitzrayim happened, and it's a tea essence, and now with the mitzvah Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim, we're remembering it and keeping the memory fresh throughout the year. And not only that, but the mitzvahs are severe mitzvahs. Like one of them is about eating chametz on Pesach, like eating bread or crackers or cookies on Pesach is a chiv kares, which means that the soul is not as connected if a person were to do such an avera, such a sin. So it's a severe concept, and chametz is one of the mitzvahs zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim, to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim. Now the Ramban says another nekuda. He comes to address the following Mishnah. And before we see the Ramban's explanation of this Mishnah, I'll ask you all if you have any opinion about Pshat in this Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Parak Beis Mishnah Aleph Avos, Havi Zahir b'mitzvah kala kivachamura. A person should be as careful with a light mitzvah as much as he is careful with a more severe mitzvah. So, at first glance, this is a hard Mishnah to understand. We would think if there's a mitzvah that's more severe, then it should require more zahirus, more being careful. And if it's a lighter mitzvah, then it doesn't require being as careful with. So why does the Mishnah say that a person should be as careful with a light mitzvah as with a strong mitzvah? I mean, that speaks to India of Zvizus, that there's a, Rabbi Kassian spoke out last Vlad, that there's a Milo, there's an advantage of doing things promptly whenever one has the opportunity of being able to do a mitzvah. And we do find by certain mitzvahs d'Rabbanan that since it is a d'Rabbanan, it's weaker, so sometimes the Chachamim starken it up and they made it like more severe. So sometimes, like my mother was saying, that sometimes for a less severe mitzvah, Chazal wanted to treat it more seriously. Mechel, do you have any thoughts how to answer this kash on the Mishnah? So Mechel Jacobowitz is saying that if we look at who commanded the mitzvah, then it doesn't matter the severity of it. And I think this is what the Ramban is coming to say. The Ramban says that with every mitzvah is saying that we are Hashem's creations. That's the yesod of every mitzvah. Whether it's a mitzvah that has punishments or great rewards, or as a more simple mitzvah like a stam, aseh, or lav, every mitzvah shries and speaks out that we are Hashem's creations. That we are like the Ramban's lashon is brio secha anachnu, that we are your created ones. This is true by a severe mitzvah and a strong mitzvah and a light mitzvah. Now this Wednesday night, as Hashem, is a yahrzeit for my mother's great grandfather of Mendel Hertz, Brainin. This is a picture of him. He's on the cover of my genealogy book. He's the one sitting in the chair. To one side, standing up in the black dress, is his wife, Mrs. Rachel Devora Brainin. And on the other side of him is my mother's grandfather, when he was a young boy, Mr. Ben Brainin. And the reason why I bring this up is because Mendel Hertz yahrzeit is on Wednesday night, Tu B'Shvat, and Mendel Hertz was Oved Hashem in many capacities. One is his nephew, Mr. Barney Michaels, Alav Shalom, says that he was a rabbi, which my cousin, Ms. Janet Sellers, says probably means that he was Malamin Chinokos, that he taught school children, and maybe gave chaburos or shiurim, something similar to what we're doing tonight. And he was a Baal Isha. He was a husband to his wife, Mrs. Rachel Devora. He was a father to 7 children. So he had a lot of opportunities to serve Hashem in different ways. And every time Mendel Hertz was Oved Hashem, was Omen Ben Nisayim, he was saying Brio Secha Anachnu, that he was calling out that I am one of your created ones with every mitzvah that he did. The Ramban says that this is with the purpose of going to shul for tefillah b'tzibur. When we daven with a minyan, with a community, we have a public forum to proclaim this message of Brio Secha Anachnu, that we are your created ones. Eli Malch, I know you have to go in a few minutes. Do you have any comments so far?
The mission over there
Which one is Elina?
says, "Have you thought of the mitzvah kala b'chmura? She'ina to yodei matan zchoron shal mitzvahs." The mission over there sounds like it tells you the reason. She'ina to yodei matan zchoron shal mitzvahs.
Okay, so Eli Malch is bringing up a kasha on the Ramban. How could it be that the Ramban says the reason that all mitzvahs are, that all of the mitzvahs tell us Brio Secha Anachnu, that we are your created ones, if the Mishnah itself tells us a reason for heavy zab mitzvah kalach v'chamura, because we don't know what the true reward is for all mitzvahs. So how could the Ramban, who's a Rishon, who's a later authority, come and give an additional reason to the Mishnah if the Mishnah itself states a reason? Alamach, do I have your kasha clear?
All we do for the Yoni Monat is just is to know how he's master.
Okay.
Could you repeat the question? The problem.
Okay, so Ali Malach is pointing out that according to the straight read of the Mishnah says the reason why you should be careful with a light mitzvah like a strong mitzvah is because we don't know what the true reward for the mitzvahs are. The Ramban is saying an additional reason because all mitzvahs, regardless of their weight, even if we would know that one mitzvah is more severe than another, but the Ramban is saying that all mitzvahs proclaim that we are the created ones of Hashem. And with the Ramban, it's important that a person has in mind when he does a mitzvah who the mitzvah is. That he's not just doing a mitzvah because it's the family tradition, or it's the custom, or it's what he's doing, or he kept Shabbos because he kept Shabbos last week. He's just in the pattern of doing it. But when a person does a mitzvah, the Ramban is encouraging us to be mindful that we are doing specifically a mitzvah that was commanded by Hashem, the Borei Olam, the creator of the world. And what a great opportunity it is to serve Hashem. Thank you, Mrs. Rudenstein. I hear you're saying an additional reason that every mitzvah refines us in a different way and helps us connect in a different way to Hashem. Like there are generally three types of mitzvahs. There's mitzvah bein adam l'chaveiro, between man and friend, bein adam l'makom, between man and Hashem, and bein adam la'atzmo, a person internally. So all of these mitzvahs work on a person in a different context, and therefore even if a person has worked on himself in a different area, but it could be this one mitzvah is refining his character, and therefore it's a special connection with Hashem. Is that what you were saying, Mrs. Rudenstein? Hidden Yeshiva Gedola starts at 8 p.m., so I see Eli Malach has to go in 2 minutes, so I just want to mention that B'ez Hashem, when Eli Malach is learning Night Seder, he's going to be saying B'yosecha Anachnu, by Mekayim the mitzvah of Limud HaTorah, of learning Torah. Ali Malach and everyone else in the base medrash is going to be saying B'yosecha Anachnu, that we are your created ones and we have the special opportunity to learn the Torah of Hashem. Now, the last main section of the Ramban is the most famous, and in fact, Rav Matisyahu Solomon, the Mashgiach of Lakewood, says, Olav Shalom, who was nifter a couple weeks ago, he says that the whole Ramban is really a lead-up, and this is the climax of the Ramban. He says if we hopped on to the earlier points, if we understood the earlier points, but we don't quite make it to the last point, he says we've gotten the minority, but we've left off the majority. So we're holding by an important stage of the Ramban. Ramban says as follows: Umin hanisim gedolim hamfursamim, from the miracles that are great and public, Adam Moda, a person is Moda. We're holding in the last paragraph of the Ramban. Benisim Hanastarim, in the concealed miracles, the hidden, more under the cover, private miracles. Shehin Yesod HaTorah Kula, that they are a Yesod for the whole Torah. Now the Ramban says a very strong lashon. She'ein la'adam chelak b'Toras Moshe Rabbeinu, ad shenamin b'chol devarenu u'mekrenu shakulam nisim. The only way that a person has a stake in the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu is if he believes in all matters and happenings that they're all miracle. Ein behem teva. There's no concept of teva, of nature, u'minhagu shel olam, and just the way that the world naturally works, cause of nature, cause and effect, laws of nature. Bein berab and bein b'yachid, whether these are public events or private events. Rather, if he does the mitzvahs, then he will succeed and he will get reward. And if he transgresses the mitzvahs, then he will be punished. So there are a number of phases of this Ramban. The first one I'll address is the very last line, which you read, about Hashem giving reward and punishment. I asked the B'tachon hotline why the Ramban added this point in, and he basically pointed me to what we say in Kriyas Shema, in the second paragraph. We say every day, twice a day, Vaya im shemar tishmu al mitzvosai. If we listen and understand and distill the mitzvos, Asher Anochi Mitzvah Eschem Hayom, that I Hashem command you, the Klal Yisrael, today, La'av Es Hashem Elokechem, to love Hashem your God, U'la'avdo, and to serve Him b'chol levavchem b'chol nafshechem, with all of your heart and all of your soul. Then, if we do that, then Hashem will send us the rain, and we'll have physical reward, we'll have food. But if we don't, then, and we are machshav entities other than Hashem and the Torah and manifestations of it, if we give credence to other entities and worship them, then Hashem will withhold the rain and we won't have what to eat, chas v'shalom. So that's why the Ramban is saying that that we remember that everything that happens in the world is a cause and effect of the mitzvahs that we do to give us reward, and if chas v'shalom we do averis, then we're punished. Now, of course, I'm not coming tonight to address the question of why bad things happen to good people, but we can hear the yesod from the Ramban that there's major what happens in the world is a direct cause and effect of our mitzvahs and chas v'shalom the averis. Something I was thinking about is, why does the Ramban use the lashon of Torah's Moshe Rabbeinu, the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu? Why didn't the Ramban simply say that a person only has a stake in the Torah if he believes that all private events are truly miracles? Why did he say the chilek of Torah's Moshe Rabbeinu? So I was thinking that it could be we see from Moshe Rabbeinu's life this concept of having nisim gluyim, revealed miracles, and then understanding that the private miracles, the things that we don't understand so well, are also miracles. What do we find in Moshe Rabbeinu's life? At first, he has some murdik and nisim that happen to him. First, when he's a baby, he has a special light that's shining from him. Then, when he's put in the water by Miriam, Bisibas Paro reaches out her hands, which is about 1 amma, like 2 feet, and then her hand miraculously reaches all the way into the water, pulls out Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu nurses from his mother, even though he's being raised in the palace in Mitzrayim, he wouldn't nurse from any of the Egyptian women. He was brought to his own mother to nurse. Moshe Rabbeinu was zocha to many nisim. But then later in his life, Moshe Rabbeinu was the recipient of some hester panim when he struck the Mitzri who was beating the Gid, and the Dasan of Aviram told Moshe Rabbeinu, "We know what's going to happen. We'll tell you to Paro." So Moshe Rabbeinu had to run away to Midian. Moshe Rabbeinu, here he was doing a mitzvah, defending this Jew against this Egyptian who was striking him, and Moshe Rabbeinu struck down the Egyptian, and now Moshe Rabbeinu has to run away. He's exiled from his land, and he has to go to Midian. So it could be that Moshe Rabbeinu understood that just like the Nisim Gluyim, the very evident miracles of his birth, was from Hashem, so too the Hester Panim, when Moshe didn't understand necessarily why he had to go, is also coming from Hashem.
I was just thinking from the other parsha, Yosef had all those hidden miracles, and he said to his brothers, it's because of Hashem, master plan that you put me in the pit, and I was told to the Ishmaelites when I came to Egypt and interpreted Pharaoh's dreams so that I can provide food ultimately for you and save the Middle East from famine.
Yeah. Yosef Atzadik believed everything was from Hashem, that it was all orchestrated.
Yeah. As everything is, like.
We spoke Hanukkah time, and I'll remind us about the vart from the altar from Kelm about Beis Yosef's kasha. Beis Yosef's kasha is, how come Hanukkah is 8 nights if the miracle of the burning of the oil was only the last 7 nights? The first night, there was a jug of oil and it burned regular. Why are we celebrating that night as a miracle? The altar from Kelm answers that the first night of Hanukkah We're celebrating the fact that oil burns at all. The fact that oil burns at all is a nace. And we understand from the last 7 nights, which the oil burned miraculously, that the first night oil burning seemingly regularly is also a miracle. And this is what Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa believed in the Gemara. Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa phrased oil burning as Mishi Yomer Sheyadlik. Whoever told oil that it should light, that's Hashem. Hashem, the reason why oil burns, Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa holds, is because Hashem told it to burn. Because Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa held this opinion of the Ramban that all hidden miracles were really miracles and not simply teva and nature. Now, Rav Matisyahu, he has a very geschmack tight. First off, Baruch Hashem, I bought this kunsh from him. It's called Ma'amari L'Hodus L'Halal on Hanukkah. I bought this after Hanukkah, the week before Matisyahu was nifter. And before I put it away for Hanukkah, before I put it away after Hanukkah for next year, I looked in the table of contents and I saw he had a shtickle on Nisim Glulim, Nisim Nistarim, which is the topic we're speaking on tonight. So I saw what he had to say. So Matisyahu has a word from the Chazon Ish, a text from the Chazon Ish. What does the word teva mean? The Chazon Ish holds teva means haratzon hayotzer masmid shel haborei, the desire that is more common of Hashem. That's what nature is. Nature is when Hashem more often decides this is what he wants to do. Usually oil burns. This is teva because Hashem is deciding that oil should burn. And on the other hand, nes, miracle, is something that less often is Hashem decides to do. Like in the story we told from the Gemara about Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, when Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa's daughter was lighting vinegar and it wasn't burning. Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa said that just like Hashem decides oil can burn, Hashem decides vinegar can burn. And in fact, the vinegar burnt the whole Shabbos. So that was a case that the less often Ratzon Hashem was decided upon. Hashem decided that vinegar should burn in that time. And Rav Matisyahu says that the main understanding of the Nisim Glulim, of the revealed miracles, is to instill in us that the hidden miracles are from Hashem. Next, I'd like to show a few places from davening where we find this aspect of Hashem orchestrating events. So far we talked about Hashem making physical, chemical, scientific properties to be able to work a certain way, like oil burning, vinegar burning. Now I'd like to talk about Hashem's Hanhaga in the world. In Berachas Kriyas Shema, we say that Hashem Levado, which we said earlier means Hashem himself decides, not depend on any other force. And this is in Berachas Kriyas Shema after we say Baruch Hashem Komo in the morning. We say that Hashem is Levado, and we say a few things. One of them we say is that Hashem is Borei Refuos. Hashem creates healings, creates remedies. Now, we might think that when the scientists and the doctors, they worked on the polio vaccine, various advances in cancer treatment, COVID vaccine, that the reason why we have these vaccines is because the scientists and the doctors worked and they came up with a solution. But what does the Tefillah tell us? The Tefillah tells us that Hashem is the Borei Refuos. Hashem is the one who created Refuos, creates healings. So therefore, this means that Hashem decided at some point, polio was a major killer in America and maybe other countries as well. Hashem decided it's time polio should not be a killer. So therefore, I, Hashem, am going to put in the minds of the scientists and doctors the chachma to be able to come up with the remedy. And therefore, they were able to come up with the remedy. Because Hashem decided it was time, therefore Hashem gave him the chachma. And same is true with advances in cancer treatment and with COVID virus. That Hashem gave the doctors and scientists the chachma to be able to come up with these remedies. Because Hashem is the Borei Refuos. Another aspect we say, Hashem is the Baal Mulchamos. Hashem is the master of wars. Now, historians look back on the Revolutionary War and they say, oh, there's some reasons why America defeated the British. Could be because the Americans were more motivated, or they knew the terrain in American soil, or the British used poor military strategy because, like my father says, they used red coats, which were very easily spotted, whereas the Americans had clothing that fit into the landscape more. So we might think that that's the reason why America won the war. But really, the Tefillah is telling us that Hashem is Baal Mulchamos. Hashem is the master of wars. Hashem controls what happens in the war. Since Hashem decided it was time for America to have a free state, therefore Hashem put in the minds of the Americans to fight a certain way, or for British to make certain mistakes, and therefore America won the war, because Hashem decided it was time for America to have a free country. Another place in davening later on, shortly before Shemona Esrei, we say that Hashem is Mashbil Geim Umagbia Shvalim. Hashem knocks down the high ones and brings up the low ones. So I thought of one example from this in Torah and one of them example in more contemporary life for both of these. So first off, for Mashbil Geim, for someone who was on top and then Hashem knocked him down, because I'll just point out what I mentioned about refuos and milchamos, about healings and wars, that's more on a global level. This is more on a personal level of individuals who were knocked down or raised up. So one individual who was knocked down. Do we have a comment?
No, so that David has that.
Okay. So one example coming up in a couple months. It's true we have 2 udders this year, but still next month is udder. Purim. Haman was second in command. He was riding high. He had all of the fame, all the riches in the world, second in command to Achashverosh, just about in charge of 127 provinces. And then what happens? Hashem decides it's time for Haman to have a downfall. So Esther becomes queen. Then there's a whole incident with Haman being, like the Gemara says, being pushed onto the couch where Esther is lying, or Esther is sitting, and Achashverosh becomes infuriated with Haman, and eventually Haman gets put to death. This is Haman was on top, and Hashem decided Haman was time to get knocked down. It was time for him to get killed. Now, in contemporary life, we find that different individuals are raised up or lowered down. So in 2016, Hashem decided it was time that Donald Trump should become the president of the United States. Hashem lifted up Donald Trump from wherever he was and made him be the top person in arguably the top country or one of the most renowned countries in the world. And then in 2020, Hashem decided it was time Donald Trump should get lowered down, so he lost the election. Could be there are other factors as well that led to these results, but this is definitely one factor. It's because Hashem is the Mashbil Geim. Hashem lowers the ones who are high. And Hashem is the Magbia Shvalim. Hashem takes someone who's low and brings them up. It's like my mother mentioned about Yosef HaTzadik earlier on. Yosef HaTzadik was in the Bor Mitzrayim, literally in a pit underneath the ground. One moment, and then Vayitzum in a bor, Yosef gets lifted up, and he's now second in command of Mitzrayim. The Beis Halevi speaks out that some people might think that the reason why Yosef HaTzadik left the pit is because Paro had a dream. Since Paro had a dream, and he needed someone to interpret the dream, therefore Yosef was chosen, and Yosef was able to interpret the dream, and he became second in command. The Beis Halevi says the real pshat is that Hashem decided that it was time for Yosef to leave the pit. Therefore, Hashem made it be that Paro would have a dream, and then Paro would ask Yosef, and Hashem would give Yosef the chachma to interpret the dream, and therefore Yosef was able to go out. Basically, he's saying it's not because Paro had a dream and therefore Yosef went out. It's rather that it was time for Yosef to go out and therefore Paro had a dream. And with the last example on this topic, for someone who was low and was raised high, I thought about J.K. Rowling, the author of Harry Potter. She was a low person in society, and then at some point she wrote these books, or maybe one book, Harry Potter, and however it happened, maybe she got the right connections, put in the right stores, the critics liked it, it was matzachein be'inei the customers liked it, and Hashem lifted her up. One day she was on lower, and then at some point over time she became higher up. Hashem decided it was time for her to become on a world-renowned scale, that she would be well known by the whole world for her books. So this is what the Ramban is saying, that all of the Nisim Nistarim, all of the private miracles, things that seemingly could happen because of cause and laws of nature, cause and effect, are really coming from Hashem. And this is if a person believes this, then he has a portion in the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu. Before we pause for comments, I'll just mention one other vart, which is that Rabbi Monk in the Sefer, The World of Prayer, which Yeshiva Gedola has the Sefer, I was reading it from my father's collection on Shabbos. He says on the words of Modim, V'al nisacha shebechol yom imanu, v'al niflosacha v'tovosacha shebechol eis erev v'okav v'tzarayim. He says that we're thanking Hashem 3 times a day in Modim for all of the miracles, whether we know about them or don't know about them, the private miracles and the public miracles and the private miracles. Do we have any comments on what we've spoken about in the past segment?
That part of the Amida, the Modim and Afnizah, it always shows me that God is with us night, day, and afternoon, in all the miracles that we experience, whether we even realize it or not. As you were saying, just the fact that it turns from night to morning, to afternoon, to night again. We're alive to experience everything God's created.
Thank you.
I think it's a miracle. It's so freezing cold out. Inherent into the earth was put oil and gas and everything. And all we have to do is push a button and we have heat. And this is all included in how the earth was made. I find that a good miracle.
Thank you.
Those are great examples, I think.
Also, on the circle of life, it teaches you not why we shouldn't be arrogant, because you can be brought low that fast.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right. Yeah, and on a deeper level, the term is called mashpil game, which is that people who are haughty are brought down. So Haman was definitely someone who was like that. Haman was very arrogant. And I'm not going to comment about the other individuals I mentioned, but Vamevin Yavin, which means those who understand will understand. Mayor, do you have any comments? I'm sorry, Ramechel, what are you saying?
Yeah, just one comment is that the Ramban and the Igeres Ramban says that because of this, that a person who's down goes up, and a person who's up goes down. It's kedai for a person to make himself low, that Hashem can lift him up rather than make himself high, that Hashem can put him down.
Thank you, Ramechel. So Ramechel is saying that if a person is makes himself low, like if he's humble, then Hashem will lift him up. Whereas if a person tries to, with gaiva and arrogance, make himself be high, then it could be cause for Hashem to knock him down. Okay, thank you. Mary, do you have any? I'm sorry, Mom. You want something to say?
I was just thinking about what Methel said, but then there's the old adage, as you were alluding to, why do bad things sometimes happen to good people, and good things happen to both bad people, the wealthy people that, got their wealth through unscrupulous ways. So usually that gets found out eventually. I think our values are still good in society.
Yeah, well, we know that the real world is, even though the Ramban is saying that there is reward in this world for those, and like we say in Kriya Shema, the reward in this world for those who do mitzvahs, and punishment in this world for those who don't, but many times we don't see that play out, so we're batuach, we're confident that this will play out in the next world. Dad, you have any comments? Okay. Mayor, do you have any comments? Is Mayor Miller still on the phone, Mom?
He's not at the moment.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. David, do you have any comments?
Yeah, you recorded this?
Are we recording this? Yeah, we're recording this.
I missed a lot of the stuff. I had to work, but if you can send me the recording, it'd be great.
Okay. Do you want written or video?
Video. Maybe you could email me?
Yeah, I'll email you. Yeah, I'll email you later. Okay. Now, I would like to close by saying a story of personal Nisim Glugim, Nisim Nistarim. Revealed miracles and hidden miracles. Now, this is not a revealed miracle in a sort of like change of teva, like some sort of physical or chemical change, but just about happenstance. I thought that this was an open miracle that happened to me, and then how we can understand this to private miracles that happen later on. When I was at home, when I moved back to Sharon a year ago, Pesach time, I was learning on the phone with some chaverim pretty regularly, but my Rashi, Rabbi Katzstein, he encouraged me to try to find some people to learn with in person. So one time it was Erev Shabbos. I go to the store on Thursday, but I happened to go on Erev Shabbos, and I saw Sruli Picard at Shaw's, and I knew who he was. So I said, Sruli, you're in town? And he's like, yeah, I'm in town. I said, do you want to learn? And he said, sure, we could learn. And Baruch Hashem, Sruli and I learned for 7 months. We learned Masechus Kedushim. We learned the first about 3-4 blot of the second parak. We learned the first 4 or 5 blot of the first parak. And Baruch Hashem is a very successful shaft. Now, this is a time that I usually don't go to Shaw's at this time, and never before did I see Sruli at Shaw's, and never after did I see Sruli at Shaw's. It was just this one time that Hashem orchestrated that I should be there at Shaw's to see Sruli and ask him to learn, and that Sruli had the time to learn, and that Baruch Hashem Sruli was a very competent learner, and Sruli and I complemented each other, and Baruch Hashem we had a very strong limud, and this was a major part of my hatzlacha and my development during the time I've been in Sharon. Now that's like the Nisim Glugim, which like we spoke about from the Rush, it takes some chachma to be able to notice an open miracle as being from Hashem as opposed to being happenstance. But assuming we can notice that it's from Hashem, now what are the Nisim Nistarim? Is more the day-to-day. Is he around to learn? How long are we able to learn for? Are we able to chap the Gemara? Are we able to understand what we're saying? How are these more the day-to-day aspects is more the Nisim Nistarim. But if we believe like the Ramban that we want to have a chiluk in Torah's Moshe Rabbeinu, we believe that just like the open miracles are from Hashem, so to the day-to-day mundane is also from Hashem, then we'll be able to have a portion of the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu. I'm going to invite anyone to share any anecdotes or experiences of open miracles that may have happened to you in your life, and if you happen to, that you can just say an open miracle, that's certainly it's worth gaining, but if we also have a way to translate that into the concealed miracles, into the day-to-day or not as revealed, I would be happy to hear anyone's thoughts.
I don't know if I have that sophisticated an analysis, but I'll just say your story about meeting up with that person and unexpectedly made me think of times when I was on the subway and it happened to be someone I know happens to get on the same car as me, or I happen to get on the same one as them, and it makes you think about all of the other times when someone is nearby, right? Maybe you would have walked out just before he came in and not seen him.
Aha, right, the exact timing. Rabbi Kirko, where I davened on Shabbos, Sheila House in Stoughton, he was just telling us about how he was driving back from a chasna. He was at Baruch Hashem, his nephew became a chassan, got married on Thursday, and Rabbi Kirko was driving back, and he said he missed being in an accident by like 30 seconds. So it was like just happened to be the timing, and he says he thinks it was in the schos of him saying Tfilas Haderech, the prayer for wayfarers, the traveler's prayer. He thinks that was the schos. But certainly we don't know. And thank you, Annie, for sharing. It's about the people we meet, or being able to meet someone we know that happens to be just at the right time.
I think this happens a lot with matchmaking, because I won't go into the whole long story, but Larry and I, through an accident, that happened to somebody else, and Larry was not supposed to be the date. He was a substitute, and there's a whole story behind it, but yeah, that was definitely a miracle. Not to say that medically we found out I must have been made from his ribs, because we both have an extra vertebrae in the same exact space in the spinal column, and we both have the exact same blood type. So
Thank you.
Oh,
Grandma, how did you and Grandpa meet?
we were introduced by a mutual friend, a friend of Grandpa's. We were three. We were three girls and three boys. We met, and Grandpa and I paired off. But you weren't. Daddy was supposed to be with someone else, and you were supposed to be with someone else, right? Yeah. Right. So we paired off. That's true. It was fate. Yeah. Like me, a hidden miracle that became an outside miracle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Be'etzes Hashem, we should be zocheh to internalize the reality that all of the revealed miracles are from Hashem. We should be zocheh to think about the miracles of Yetzias Mitzrayim, of the Makos, of the 10 plagues, as being from Hashem. We should be zocheh to carry out these mitzvahs, Zecher L'Yetzias Mitzrayim, and do them with mindfulness, to remember that Hashem that Hashem exists, that Hashem is involved with the world, and Hashem is fully capable. And we do these mitzvahs mindfully. This will remind us all the time. And when we do mitzvahs, we'll say Briosecha Anachnu, that we are Hashem's created ones, especially when we daven with the tzibur. And now that we have this hakara, that the open miracles are from Hashem, may be merited to see that the concealed miracles are also from Hashem, the day-to-day, mundane, when we don't understand what happens, or it seems like natural pattern, to recognize that it's all from Hashem, and therefore, Be'ez Hashem will be zocha, will be merited, to have a chelak, to have a portion in the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu. Thank you, everyone, for joining.